Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm Marina Grosu from Washington, D.C. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. The head of the Coptic Orthodox Church will be visiting Rome this week to commemorate the 50th anniversary of an historic pact that brought to an end a 1,500-year-old theological dispute. Patriarch Tawadros II will arrive at the Vatican from Egypt and will attend the general audience of Pope Francis on Wednesday, where he will address the gathering. The head of this ancient Oriental church, founded by the evangelist St. Mark, will take part in a private prayer service with the Roman Pontiff on Thursday. On Sunday, he will celebrate the Divine Liturgy in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, which is the cathedral of the Pope. The Coptic Orthodox Bishop of London, Archbishop Ameyu, will accompany Patriarch Tawadros during his visit. It was 50 years ago that Pope Paul VI signed a Christological agreement with Patriarch Shenouda III, bringing an end to the 1,500-year-old theological dispute between the Roman and Coptic churches. Bodies are still being recovered in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, where floods last week claimed more than 400 lives. It is one of the most deadliest tragedies in the African nation's recent history. Videos shared online showed survivors watching as aid workers heap corpses into freshly dug mass graves. The workers have spent days recovering mud-caked bodies from the villages of Bushushu and Nyamukubi, both in the South Kivu province, where days of torrential rain triggered landslides and caused rivers to break their banks. The United Nations estimates that hundreds of people are still missing. The Congolese Red Cross says that 274 people, including 98 women and 82 children, have lost their lives so far. The floods destroyed homes, schools, and blocked off highways, displacing more than 8,000 people. Leaders of the Catholic Church in the South Sudan are encouraging believers to pray for long-lasting peace and stability in their neighboring country, Sudan, where civil war broke out on April 15th. The Archbishop Ameyu Martin made a request for prayers for the clergy ministering in Sudan amid the turmoil. He made this request while speaking at the meeting in Juba, the capital of South Sudan. The South Sudanese Archbishop emphasized the need to maintain peace, adding that the South Sudanese people should not forget their Sudanese brothers and sisters in times of need and difficulties. Army units of the Sudanese Armed Forces loyal to General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan had been engaged in combat with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces led by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo since April 15th for gaining an upper hand in forming the new government. The governor of the U.S. state of North Dakota has signed into law a bill that protects teachers and state employees who choose to ignore the so-called transgender pronouns used by students. Governor Doug Burgum said that the new law codifies existing practices while reaffirming the First Amendment right to free speech. He also praised it for balancing the rights of students, parents, and teachers. The new law mandates that teachers have to inform guardians and parents if a student experiences gender dysphoria. It also mentions that such students have to use bathrooms in schools as per their biological sex in the absence of parental consent. Supporters of the new law say that it boosts the rights of parents and provides solace to teachers. The bill was passed with veto-proof majorities in both the Senate and the House. The Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors has called for a new universal framework to tackle the issues of child sexual abuse. After the Commission's plenary session, the members came up with various strategies to safeguard against abuse. A number of changes to the working methodology were introduced at the plenary meeting. These include the calls to update church guidelines, strategies to combat abuses, including online child abuse, a plan to focus on the needs of victims and survivors, and an in-depth study on the issue of vulnerability in its various forms. The new framework comes against the backdrop of Pope Francis's appeal for continuous efforts to strengthen norms of conduct and protect the church from the crime of sexual abuse. The Catholic bishops of the United States have decried the Secure the Border Act of 2023 as excessive, and they have stated that the bill's approval cannot be justified. In an open letter to Congress, Bishop Mark Seitz of El Paso and the chairman of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration criticized the sweeping immigration bill. It calls for tougher border enforcement in response to the large number of migrants entering the country. It includes recommendations for restarting border wall construction, stopping the catch and release practice, and boosting the number of Border Patrol agents, among others. In addition, the bishop voiced concern that the bill would significantly diminish the United States' long-standing commitment to provide humanitarian protection, and that it will endanger unaccompanied children. Dozens of former senior American diplomats are urging President Joe Biden to end all diplomatic relations with Iran. The call comes on the 5th anniversary of former President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw the U.S. from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action inked with Iran by former President Barack Obama. In a letter, the diplomat said Biden's present approach of easing sanctions in exchange for good behavior is risky, since it depends not on leverage from the United States, but rather on the preferences of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The letter's signatories include numerous former members of Congress, as well as former American ambassadors to numerous nations and international organizations. Since taking office, the Biden administration has attempted to re-enter the Obama-era Iran nuclear deal, but talks have stalled. The United Nations has condemned the Taliban for carrying out public executions, whippings, and stonings after it seized power in Afghanistan almost 2 years ago. As many as 274 men, 58 women, and 2 boys were publicly flogged in Afghanistan over the past 6 months, according to a study by the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. The study reveals that the legal system in Afghanistan is currently failing to safeguard minimum fair trial and due process guarantees. Most punishments are for adultery and running away from home. Other offenses that invite corporal punishment include theft, homosexuality, consuming alcohol, fraud, and drug trafficking. The UN has called on the Taliban to immediately suspend all executions. The regime has also increasingly tightened restrictions on women, prohibiting them from public spaces like parks and gyms. The limitations have sparked criticism on a global scale, further isolating the nation as the humanitarian situation and economy deteriorate. In the U.S. state of Maryland, Governor Wes Moore and Democratic lawmakers are being criticized by Republicans for approving legislation that expands taxpayer-funded Medicaid coverage to include so-called sex change surgeries and drugs for children. The old law of the state says that Medicaid can cover such surgeries and therapies for patients who are at least 18 years of age. The old law will be in effect until January 1 next year. However, the new law takes away the age requirement for mental health services, hormone replacement therapy, and so-called sex change surgery. It also expands the services provided to children and adults who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Most Republican lawmakers opposed the bill. They wanted amendments that would have prevented Medicaid from covering so-called sex change surgeries for kids and parental consent as well. A Nigerian court began hearing separate lawsuits filed by the opposition challenging the victory of the incumbent party in the country's presidential election. The Court of Appeal in the capital Abuja is hearing the statements by the opponents challenging the victory of Bola Tinubu as president. Armed security guards barred the facility's main entrances as the court session got underway and blocked people from entering. Meanwhile, demonstrators with placards and flags took to the streets stating that the election was flawed. Following the polling in February, the National Election Commission announced the victory of Tinubu of the ruling All Progressives Congress. However, the 2 leading opposition candidates challenged the results, disputing Tinubu's eligibility and asserting that election results from many polling stations had been tampered with. The number of internally displaced persons in conflict-ridden Myanmar has surpassed 680,000 between January and April this year. The reports by an independent research group show that the total number of people displaced is more than 2.6 million since the military coup of February 2021, which toppled the legitimately elected government in the Asian nation. Meanwhile, many humanitarian organizations are trying to help those who lost their homes or have fled. There are allegations that the junta frequently prevents aid distribution to minorities, especially Christians. Earlier this month, the progressive Karenni People Force reported that 134 refugees from the Kaya state died in the conflict due to the lack of food and medical assistance. A Christian mayoral candidate in Britain who lost her job in May last year for voicing her biblical beliefs on marriage during the campaign has settled the lawsuit filed against her ex-employer. Maureen Martin of Lewisham in London settled the lawsuit after being given befitting compensation by her former employer, L&Q. An ordained minister, Martin included her traditional view on marriage in her election campaign. She shared her campaign brochure having the biblical teaching on marriage on social media platforms. Homosexual activists complained to L&Q after the brochure was posted online. Company officials found issues with her previous social media posts regarding homosexuality and terminated her contract after accusing her of spreading so-called hate speech. Martin approached the Christian Legal Center and filed a lawsuit arguing that she was harassed, discriminated against, and dismissed from service. An American digital rights activist has alleged that artificial intelligence-driven facial recognition more likely points at the wrong person in a crime investigation if he or she is Black or Asian. Matthew Guariglia of the Electronics Frontier Foundation said in an interview with BBC that technology use in police investigations has boomed in recent years after the January 6th Capitol incident. He alleged that the use of facial recognition technology is far too invasive. The Government Accountability Office surveyed 42 federal agencies, of which 20 used the technology for criminal investigations. However, the artificial intelligence algorithms in the technology falsely identify Blacks and Asians 10 to 100 times more than white faces. This was revealed by a 2019 study conducted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. After the study came out, several Black men were arrested on charges they did not commit. The Supreme Court of the U.S. state of Ohio is being urged by 18 other states to remove the temporary block on the abortion ban issued by a lower court. Led by Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Fitch, a 20-page brief was filed at the Ohio Supreme Court to lift the block on enforcing the state's ban on abortion after 6 weeks. The attorneys general from the states submitted an affidavit in court. Last year, a Hamilton County court ordered a temporary injunction against the law for the duration of the case, in which its constitutionality will be argued. The proposed Ohio abortion ban protects preborn children by prohibiting abortionists from ending babies' lives once their heartbeat is detected. And those are your latest headlines. Join us again tomorrow for more. You can also visit swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.